Welcome back to the Game Collection. I am SuperDerek, and this is Breath of Fire. You could say I've been looking forward to reviewing this game for quite a while now, and after playing through Hydlide, I think I deserve a bit of a break. So, where to begin? I found this game years ago when I was looking for other games to scratch that RPG itch after I played through EarthBound. It's kind of funny because Lufia left me feeling a bit burned, but Breath of Fire was a breath of fresh air. But before I get too far into this, I should warn you. With this game in particular, the nostalgia factor for me is in full effect, and despite my best efforts to remain impartial, I can't guarantee that this review is going to be entirely unbiased. But even for people who haven't had the benefit or the background, the history with this franchise that I have, I think that Breath of Fire will offer some things to you that may interest you. Breath of Fire was the first ever RPG developed by Capcom, a company which I'm sure you know is famous for games like the Street Fighter series and Mega Man. The game was released in Japan in 1993 and was later brought over to the United States in 1994. The game's translation, localization, and promotion were all handed over to Squaresoft, a company that was much more familiar with translating and localizing such text-heavy games. Unfortunately, the localization did encounter some issues when it came to how long they were able to make the names of items and characters. As a result, character names can only be 4 characters long, and a lot of items had to be abbreviated, leaving a lot of players confused as to what some items actually were. In Breath of Fire, you play as a young man in the Dragon Clan named Ryu. Yeah, like that Ryu. Or Ryu. Whatever. Doesn't matter. As Ryu, you wake up in the middle of the night to find that your entire village is under attack by the Dark Dragon Clan. Ryu is in the Light Dragon Clan, and obviously these two groups hate each other. In an act of desperation, your sister casts a spell of petrification over the entire remaining survivors of the village, saving their lives, and goes off to duel with none other than the Dark Dragon leader. Unfortunately, despite her best efforts, she is captured, and that's where our story picks up. Overall, the story is pretty standard fare for an RPG. It's not gonna really test too many limits. The strength of the game, though, lies in its smaller individual character arcs, which hold your attention long enough to get you over to the beginning of the next character arc. So, it's passable. It keeps you entertained, but it's not going to compete with like a Final Fantasy storyline or anything like that. It's not too convoluted, and it's really easy to follow and to pick up, which is especially nice for people who haven't really gotten into the RPG genre yet. So despite Breath of Fire being a mostly typical turn-based RPG, there are some unique pieces to this game, to the whole franchise that gives it a distinct flavor. Along the way to save your sister and prevent the apocalypse, you come across people who become your friends and are compelled to help you on your quest. These people are members of other clans. Clans that are essentially mixed hybrids of human and animal. So there's like a wolf guy, there's a fish guy, there's an ox guy. So each character from a different clan that joins you on your quest brings something unique to the table. Some of them have special skills that help you transport between locations. Others have special abilities to go hunting or to break down walls, and those really come in handy when you're trying to solve puzzles later on in the game. Well, actually, there are puzzles throughout the game. Solving puzzles is actually a really big part of the Breath of Fire series. As a matter of fact, up to this point, a lot of RPGs just use dungeons as grinding grounds where you encounter tons and tons of enemies along your more or less straight path to the final boss. However, Breath of Fire does things a little bit differently. Instead, the entire dungeon is more like a giant puzzle. Some of them are mazes, some of them just have a lot of unique aspects to them, like rotating rooms and stuff that really just mess with your mind. Some of them have specific patterns that you have to follow in order to get through them. What's really cool about this game is that it's really rewarding for people who don't mind going off the beaten path, who like to explore every nook and cranny of the game, because there's lots of, special armor and equipment and transformation spells that you can get. It's just really rewarding, and actually by the end of the game, you'll have amassed these godlike powers just from, exploring the place. I do have one gripe about the dungeon exploring experience though, and that's that it's got a really high enemy encounter rate that you're every 5 steps or so you're encountering a new enemy, and it wouldn't be so bad if the enemies were easy, just, quick battles, but these even normal enemies seem to take like a few minutes to kill, and it's just every 5 steps. I mean, it wouldn't be so bad either if you leveled up more frequently than you do, but you really don't. But on the plus side, after battling a whole lot, the game eventually gets to a point where enemies become so easy to fight. It really builds up a momentum, it starts off slow and trudging, but by the end of the game it's just, man, these battles are really fun. And not only are the battles really fun, they're beautiful. The game's battles are completely animated. The enemies that you're fighting are moving, they have attack spells that are completely animated, your characters are animated. Some of them, they all swing their sword when you choose to attack, they all have spell casting animations. They're not all just super deformed like all the Final Fantasy games were. As a matter of fact, if you compare the battle system between Final Fantasy and the Breath of Fire series, or the Dragon Warrior series to the Breath of Fire series, you'll see that the difference between these is huge. And it was a really big deal back in the day, because you could actually see your full-size characters fighting full-size monsters, and it really gave you a good sense of scale. So in addition to the amazing graphics that come with Breath of Fire, you're also, in typical Capcom fashion, treated to some really awesome music. A lot of people have compared this game's music to that of Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which was also by Capcom, and I think that there are some parts that are pretty reminiscent, but I think that Breath of Fire has a lot more variety than did Super Ghouls and Ghosts, because a lot of times you're also treated to, piano and a lot of funky bass beats, but it's also not annoying, and that is something that that's pretty important. A lot of times when I'm playing games back here, my wife will tell me to turn it down because the music is just so annoying. But with this game, when I had it turned up during the ending credits, she's like, "Did you just beat that game?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" "I heard some really pretty sounding music," so even she agrees. In just a few months, we'll be coming upon the 20th anniversary of the release of Breath of Fire in the United States. Unfortunately, Europe didn't actually get this game until 2001, when the game was released in Europe on the Game Boy Advance. This version of the game featured a slightly improved graphical interface, but a lot worse audio, and the translation wasn't even touched. So, generally speaking, I don't really recommend that version of the game. As of the time of this review, Breath of Fire hasn't yet been digitally re-released on any modern consoles, so if you want to play the game, you'll have to either get it on Game Boy Advance or Super Nintendo. I recommend the Super Nintendo version just because it's the original, but if you want to go with that one, it's going to cost you about $24, which is considerably less than the average RPG on the Super Nintendo. If you want to get the Game Boy Advance version of the game though, you'll be saving a few bucks because it's only about $16. Upon the release of Breath of Fire in the United States, the game was met with mostly positive criticism from reviewers, which was excellent news for Capcom because by the time this game was released in the United States, they were already well underway in developing the game's sequel, Breath of Fire 2. But we'll talk about that game next time on the Game Collection. Breath of Fire was the first ever action RPG developed by Capcom. Breath of Fire was the first ever action... This wasn't an action game. Breath of Fire was the first ever RPG developed by Capcom, the company I'm sure you're familiar. As a result, characters' names can only be 4 digits long. As a result, character names can only be 4 characters long. Overall, this story is pretty standard fare for an RPG, and there's not really going to be a whole lot of competition with this game between the other games that I've already reviewed, like EarthBound. What else have I reviewed? A wolf guy, there's a fish guy, there's an ox guy. It's all really, really cool, and I highly recommend playing as them. Well, you don't have a choice if you're going to play this game. And what's really cool about this game is that it rewards you heavily for beating off